Hello. I've gotten a couple requests for going back to the read aloud that we had started before spring break, The Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus. And I'm going to tape record about 10-15 minutes a day, and you're welcome to watch it and listen to it if you want to. But what I had to do first after I went and got the book is to go back through and find what the book was about, because I had kind of forgotten. And I know that we have our main character, Avon. She was born with no arms, just a genetic defect, and she has learned to use her feet to do everything, to eat, to read, to write, to get around, and her parents are very encouraging of her to do whatever she can, not to let that stop her. Her one favorite sport is definitely soccer, because she can play that with her feet. And she's lived in Kansas, where she is very well known in her school and with her friends, and they see her for who she is, and they've known her so long they don't even notice her disability. But her parents get a new job. They are going to manage kind of a rundown amusement park in Arizona called Stagecoach Pass. And so she moves. They have to move. The father really needs the job, and so does the mother. And she's going to be starting a new school. So she moves there. First, she gets to know the amusement park. She's exploring it. She meets some of the characters. There's a couple of characters. There's Henry, who serves ice cream, but when you go and you order your ice cream, he just gives you whatever he feels like giving to you. It doesn't matter what you order. And when she's in the ice cream shop, she notices that there's all these pictures on the wall, but that all the pictures about the Kavanaughs, who own the Stagecoach Pass, the amusement park, they're all missing. And that might be a clue to something in the rest of the book, and it might not be. And then there's Bob. Bob is the one who runs the day-to-day business along with her parents. And not a lot of people go to Stagecoach Pass. It's getting kind of run down. One day when she explores it, she finds a shack, and the shack has 7 do not enter signs nailed on it. And she ends that page by saying, I have to get in there. She hasn't gotten back to that. We haven't gotten to the rest of that part of the story yet. And then the other section of the story is school for her. Very difficult for her. She's anticipating a lot of looks and things for having her disability, and it's just as she predicted. People are uncomfortable. She doesn't really have any friends. She thinks that people are a little bit afraid of her. She ends up talking to 2 girls, and they were wondering if having no arms was contagious. And so she ends up one day going into the library to have lunch, and she meets a boy named Connor. And Connor spends his lunches usually in the library, and he has something called Tourette's syndrome, which is a syndrome where you have movements like you might nod your head or blink your eyes, or maybe you blurt out words and you have no control over it. It's almost like a little wiring in the brain that just causes that to happen. So he's used to unusual looks too, and it sounds like these 2 are going to be good friends. They've just met in our story, though. So that's kind of a rundown of what's happened so far. And on chapter 10 is where we left off. I'm going to go back a little bit. I don't know if you can see that, to what we've read before, because I want you to notice that she writes blog posts about her life. And so I'm going to go back to the beginning of chapter 10, where she starts writing about her experiences to share. One Sunday afternoon, I wrote another blog post. Quote, when you have a malformation, yuck, I hate that word, like I do, you definitely have to deal with the unusual looks. The most popular look I get is the one I like to call, I'm so cool, nothing phases me, not even your missing arms look. These are the people who pretend they didn't even notice my missing arms. You could also call this the sure, I'm totally used to seeing people with no arms look, or the I have tons of armless friends look, or something like that. These people, they're just way too blasé about it. I mean, come on, you don't really notice my missing arms? Because I can tell you do by how you refuse to look at my torso. Like the whole sun is just sitting there in the middle of my body. I say, just go ahead and look, for goodness sake. Look and ask questions if you want. These people try way too hard. Then There's the look that's like, oh my gosh, I'm staring at your armless area. Just kidding. No, I'm not. I'm not staring. No, really, I'm not staring. These are the people I can clearly see staring at me out of the corner of their eye, but as soon as I look at them, they look away. Serious people, you're not fooling anyone. Just keep on staring. It's okay to be curious. Everyone is. There's also the dreaded pity look. Yuck. The, oh, you poor thing without arms. These people not only look at me, but they give me this pitifully sad smile when I make eye contact with them. They should see those looks before they do them. They should save them for starving homeless orphans. Being armless really isn't that bad. And then there's the worst look of all. I have to deal with it because it almost always comes from little kids who haven't learned any manners yet. It's the, I can't stop staring at you because you're a freak look. Sometimes these looks end in screams and tears and kids running away. I stopped typing my blog. The post sounded all lighthearted and ha-ha funny, but I didn't write that I ignore those looks to the best of my ability. I didn't write that I pretend they don't bother me, but even after 13 years of seeing them, they still hurt. I also didn't write that the last time I got one of these looks was just the day before while I was grocery shopping with Mom. Mom likes to take me to the grocery shopping store. The grocery store. She says it's because I need to learn how to grocery shop on my own. And I think it's really because she likes having a child slave to command. So Mom basically makes me handle all the groceries in the store. I have to get the canned tomatoes from the bottom shelf, the soy sauce from the top shelf. I'm so flexible, it would blow your mind. The cereal from the middle shelves, the bag of apples from the produce department. We go with bagged produce, so I'm not putting my feet all over all of the other fresh fruit in front of people. And yes, even the rotisserie chicken. The rotisserie chicken was sort of a disaster, but that's not the point of the story. The fact is that it takes 3 hours to grocery shop. Isn't the point either. Sometimes I wish Mom had other hobbies besides teaching me how to do things. So I was in the central aisle trying to slide this box of corn puffs out from the shelf with my foot. I had just finally gotten it wedged between my head and shoulders, but as I stood up and turned to drop it into the cart, I caught this little girl standing at the aisle giving me the dreaded, I can't stop staring at you because you're a freak look. I stared back at her for a moment. You got a problem with corn puffs? I asked. Her mom shot her head up from reading the label on the can of instant oatmeal. She saw what was going on and grabbed her cart and daughter and scurried away. I acted all cool, but I couldn't have cared less. That's how I acted. But I still remember it happening. I remember every time it happens. When I was done writing my post, Dad asked me to help him put some fresh paint on the flat wooden picture standing by the front entrance of the park. The kind with the cutouts people stick their head through for photographs. I seriously doubted anyone took pictures with that faded wooden figurines, but I agreed to go because, well, I'm a good daughter. I can see why he wanted to freshen them up. The paint was so faded you could hardly tell what they even were anymore. And one of them looked like you were sticking your head through a giant blob, not exactly what you would want to take a picture of. Dad put a chair out in front of me to sit, and I painted with my foot. My painting skills aren't exactly the finest, but I can manage large, simple pictures. Just don't expect me to paint your portrait unless a stick figure is acceptable. As I worked out turning this blob back into a small hill with a barrel cactus on top of it, I saw Connor walking over the bridge that connected the parking lot to the park. The bridge was built over a wash. Washes, to me, are like empty riverbeds that run all over North Scottsdale so that when it rains, the water can flood into the city somewhere. Connor didn't have to go through a kiosk or anything like he entered the park because admission was free. All the money was made from paying attractions, if you could call those attractions. "Hey, Connor," I said as he walked up to me, barking a few times. "You came." "Hi, Avon," he said, looking around, squeezing his hands together. "There aren't very many people here." "Oh, this place is always like that," I told him, and Connor seemed relieved. Dad looked up from painting the gun on the cowboy's hands. I thought it was a sea cucumber at first, but a gun made a lot more sense. Why would a cowboy have a sea cucumber anyway? "Who's this, Avon?" Dad asked. "Oh, hi, Dad. This is Connor. We met at school." Dad reached out his hand and Connor shook it. "Nice to meet you, Connor." "Do you mind if I take a break?" I asked Dad, and he looked at my handiwork so far and said, "Well, looks a lot less like a blob, so I guess you're free to go." I handed him my paintbrush, slipped my shoes back on, and walked off with Connor down the main street. I just noticed something in the story. She said, "I handed him my paintbrush," with her foot. I just thought that was funny. Let's see. Suddenly, Connor was chuckling behind me. "It's just so cool that you live here," he said, but I scowled at that comment. "So, what have you been up to?" "Nah, nothing. My mom's working all weekend, and I got tired of playing video games, so I thought I'd walk over and see if you were here." It made me feel good that he had come here just to see me, especially since he had mentioned not liking to go out. "I like to play video games." He looked up at me and said, "Really?" "Yeah," I said, annoyed at his look of surprise. "I can play. I bet I could kick your butt at just about any game." "Are you challenging me? Because pretty much all I do when I'm at home is play video games. I'm like almost a professional." "Well, we'll see about that," I said. "Does your mom always work on the weekends?" He shrugged and said, "Yeah, she works all the time. She has 2 jobs. He shrugged again, and I realized the shrugging was just another one of his tics. I wondered how many different tics he has as a part of Tourette's. "What does your mom do?" I asked. "She's an ER nurse." "Ooh, that's cool." "Well, I guess," said Connor, "except I never get to see her." "Oh, I'm sorry." I didn't know what else to say, so I walked up to the porch of the soda shop and sat down in one of the rocking chairs, and Connor sat beside me. I tried to think of something else to talk about. "My mom took me to the school instrument museum yesterday. Have you ever been there?" Connor shook his head. "I don't really get out much." "Do you play any instruments?" "No," he shook his head, and I waited for him to ask me if I did, but he didn't, and I figured it was because he assumed I couldn't without any arms. So finally I said, "I play." He looked surprised again, of course. Why were people always surprised I could do stuff? I'd bet I'd get surprised look if I told people I could breathe air without help or swallow my food. "What do you play?" he asked. "The guitar." "With your feet?" "No, with my belly button," I said. Connor's eyes widened, and then he pursed his lips into a little smirk. "You're joking again, aren't you?" "Yes, I play with my feet. I do not play with my belly button." "That's awesome," he said, rocking in his chair and blinking his eyes rapidly. He did look impressed. "Play for me sometimes. I just got to see you playing with your feet." I shifted in my seat and said, "Sure." I didn't tell him I also wrote my own music and that I sang too. In the 5th grade, I had come to the realization that it was far more productive for me to channel my creative storytelling into songwriting than use it to shock people with morbid horror stories about how I lost my arms. I had written several songs since then, and most of them, they were pretty bad. Like, "Take an ice pick to your ears" bad. A song I wrote about learning how to put on clothes came to mind, and a couple of possibly worth playing, but the only people had ever done was look at me without my arms. I asked him a question. "Do you ever see your dad?" His expression turned somber, and I was instantly sorry that I had asked. And he said, "No, not too much." "That's too bad," he said. And I'm going to keep these to about 15 minutes. So I'm going to stop here, but I will post another one where I left off.